Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, and welcome to the BaileyWiki channel, where we teach everyday DMs how to create truly amazing experiences for their players by combining art and technology. We also make modular systems and scenes that you can use without any setup, and our latest release is going to be the backdrop for today's episode of Foundry Basics. With the recent release of Foundry version 12 stable, we thought it was a great time to do a Foundry Basics episode on Foundry major version updates and you. So today we're going to discuss what is a Foundry major version update, what you need to know about major versions in general, and how to update to the latest major versions while keeping your data and your games safe, including creating and restoring backups and snapshots of your data should anything go wrong. Before we dive in, there are a few notes to make here. First and foremost, we're using the Foundry version 11 to version 12 update process as an example today, but the information here is going to apply to just about any major version update that happens to Foundry in the future. Should this video become out of date, we'll have the updated version linked in a card on screen right now. Secondly, we're going to be using a self-hosted system here. So if you are self-hosting or you're using a cloud service like Oracle Cloud or Amazon Web Services to host your Foundry instance, this will look exactly the same for you. But if you're using a dedicated hosting service like The Forge, it may look a little different. If you see any discrepancies between this video and your hosting service, check their documentation on backups and updates. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into Foundry version updates. First, let's begin with what exactly is a Foundry major version update. Major versions are going to be changes from things like Foundry version 11 to Foundry version 12, as opposed to Foundry version 11 build 300 to Foundry version 11 build 315. Major version updates usually include additional features and refinements to the FoundryVTT platform. As a result, whenever you update to a major version, there's a lot of cool new toys and tools for you to use within the platform. But that does come at the price of modules and systems needing to catch up to the latest major version. Depending upon the module and the update, this can range from either having to do nothing at all on the module developer's behalf or having to nearly completely rewrite their code. It just varies from module to module and system to system based upon the major version update. For that reason, it's really important to take a lot of different precautions before we get into actually updating a major version of Foundry. So as you can imagine, new major versions to Foundry can generate a lot of excitement, and you may be tempted to jump right in and immediately update as soon as a stable version is available. It's important to restrain yourself a little bit though. As we just mentioned, modules and systems need to catch up with the major version to make sure that they're either leveraging everything appropriately or their code isn't going to have issues with the latest version of Foundry. If you're running your game in, say, Pathfinder, and Pathfinder isn't available for Foundry version 12, it does you no good to update to version 12 to play your game. You're going to have to stay on version 11 for a little bit until Pathfinder has been updated. Additionally, when a new major version comes out, there's often several minor version updates shortly thereafter, either refining additional features that were added in the major version or fixing some bugs that may have cropped up along the way. For all of these reasons, we really recommend that you wait at least a month before you actually start considering updating to the latest major version of Foundry. This gives a pretty good amount of time for additional minor versions to come out to fix any glaring bugs that may have cropped up, and also hopefully gives enough time for all of your favorite modules and systems to catch up. Of course, if you are running a lot of modules and they are particularly technical, then you may want to extend that period even longer. Either way, we're going to go through the process of how to identify what modules are ready to go and what you can do about that process to make sure that your transition is as safe and as smooth as possible for you and your data. After you've waited a bit, the first step to updating your major version of Foundry is to go ahead and click on this update button right here. This is where you will scan for updates and you'll select which channel you want to be looking for updates on. We highly recommend you only ever have this on stable unless you are a developer. Either way, you can go ahead and hit check for update. and you're going to get this pop-up here with two options at the bottom. The first one we're going to concern ourselves with is this compatibility checker. This is going to look at the modules that you have installed and compare it to the module pages that Foundry has to see if there is a version of the module that is compatible with the latest major version. So while the version that you're using might not be compatible with, say, V12, another version that has been uploaded and isn't available to V11 users could be. So you're going to use this to check out the different compatibilities here. If you take a look at the not compatible, these are going to be things that either say explicitly they're not compatible with V12, maybe they have a maximum version of V11, or the Foundry compatibility checker found things like functions that the module is calling in its code that are no longer available to it in V12. Regardless, go through this list and look carefully at the modules in here. If there's anything that you can't live without, then you need to double check their module page, as sometimes this might be a bit of a false positive, where there is in fact a version, but it's got a different manifest, etc. You just want to do your due diligence here and make sure that either the module is in fact updated for this next version, or even if it's going to be updated for this next version. Oftentimes, modules will not be continued into subsequent Foundry versions because their main features have been rolled into core. Either way, you want to double check this, and if it's not being continued, you either want to identify if it's going to be core, find an alternative, or accept that you're going to lose the functionality of that module unless the author comes back and maintains it. You also want to check the not verified section. These are going to be modules that don't have anything that explicitly tells the compatibility checker that it doesn't work with the next version, but it might not work. You should be prepared for these modules not functioning quite as you expect them to when you update to the next major version. Again, check out the module pages or the communities around those modules and systems to see if there is any information on how it performs in the next version before you take the plunge. After reviewing this list, if you don't have anything in these last two categories of needs verification or is definitely not compatible, then you're already good to go. You're free to proceed to the next step, make backups, and go ahead and update. Of course, most of us are probably going to have at least one module in either of those categories of needs verification or doesn't work. So you're going to have to ask yourself if you need to wait for those modules and systems to update, or if you're going to continue on without them. If you've got a lot of modules in those categories, and especially if those modules have authors saying that they're working on the updates, but they're not ready yet, then we would highly suggest that you hold off a bit before updating. Whether you have found that all of your modules and systems are good to go for the next version, or you've made your own kind of risk determination on being willing to accept and handle any kind of incompatibilities that crop up, you're ready to now make a snapshot before you go into the next version. We're creating this so that in case something goes really bad, we can roll things back and we can get all of our data back without an issue. So we'll go ahead and click on this Create Snapshot button at the bottom of this Update Checker window here. When you click on it, it's going to give you a pop-up that is going to tell you how much space a snapshot is going to take up and how much space is available on the drive where you're storing your Foundry instance. Then you also have a section to put in a note. The note is optional, but we recommend you put in something descriptive, version you're switching to, or the starting version to the ending version, etc. Just something descriptive to help you remember it. And then when you're ready, go ahead and start the snapshot process. As mentioned in the pop-up, it's going to take longer the more modules and data that you have in here, so just be prepared for this to run for several minutes depending upon how much stuff you've got on your Foundry instance. You can move this pop-up out of the way to be able to see progress on individual modules, but there's not an overall progress bar. Just come back whenever this is completely finished and you don't see any of these more blue loading bars. After you finish your snapshot, we'll return to this update checker window to actually update Foundry. Down here at the bottom, you'll see that there's a section detailing that because this is a major update to core software, you're going to have to actually install this from the FoundryVTT website. Sometimes you won't have to do this. For example, with most minor versions, you just can click update here, but on major versions, you will usually have to reinstall directly from the website. So with that, you can go ahead and click on the link here, and it will take you to your licenses part of your profile. You'll have to log in to be able to do that, of course, but then you'll have the option for downloads. Here on your purchase licenses page, you're going to have downloads up at the very top. Here you can select a specific version. It's by default going to go to their recommended version, which is just the latest stable release that Foundry has. You'll also select your operating system. In my case, it's going to be Windows. And then I'm going to go ahead and download this. And once it's downloaded, I will run the installer. Once you've finished installing the latest version and launched Foundry back up, you'll notice that there are tags on your worlds, modules, and systems. These are indicating the last version that they were run on and their compatibility state. You may notice that some of the modules from your compatibility checker, if they were listed as not compatible, might not actually show up in your add-on module list. So don't be alarmed if those aren't there anymore. Before continuing, you may want to create a snapshot of this stage where you have updated the core Foundry, but you have not updated all of your modules. This just gives you another option for a place to come back to in case something goes wrong with your update procedure. To make a snapshot at any time, you can go ahead and click on this floppy disk icon up here for managing backups. At the very top of the dialog, you have the Create Snapshot option, which will allow you to generate a snapshot of the current state of your Foundry instance without having to go into the update window, etc. So I would recommend that you go ahead and do this, again, as just another point in the machine that you can come back to. Whether you've made that snapshot or not, the next stage is to first update all of your systems. So we'll just go through and update all for that. And then once you've updated the systems, update your modules. We do systems first because if you have system-dependent modules, some of those might require a specific version or later of the systems that they are made for. After the modules and systems have been updated, it's time to go ahead and launch open your world. When you first click on it to launch it, it's going to give you a pop-up saying that you need to do a data migration. This is also going to give you an opportunity to make a backup beforehand. By default, this is ticked on. We highly recommend that you leave it ticked on. And when it comes up, you make a descriptive note about the backup. Yes, in theory, your snapshots give you an option and everything, but this is a more granular way to roll back just a world in case something went wrong with the world rather than the rest of your setup. After the backup is complete and the data is migrated from your world, it will launch and will have the exact same credentials and user profiles that you had on it before. Once you've launched it, depending upon the modules that you have, you may have to do a lot of migrating. Typically, modules are going to have some kind of automation to this. For example, levels, if it has a migration, Ripper is really good about putting in functions and scripts that will automatically start migrating data for you so that it is all compliant with the latest version of Foundry. So go ahead and let any module migrations that you may have run and get all that data sorted out before you start exploring the rest of your world. After all of those migrations are complete, then take a look around your world. Is there anything really crazy missing that you didn't expect? Check out your managed modules. See if there are modules that are disabled that should be enabled, or modules that are missing from the list that you expected to be there. Again, if there is a major incompatibility with the latest version of Foundry, some modules might not even show up in your managed modules list, in which case you may need to manually reinstall them or check to see if they're still not updated. But take a tour, see if there's anything catastrophically wrong, or if there's anything that is missing that you just can't live without in this version. If it all looks good to you, everything is right where you expect it to be and exactly where you left it, then congratulations. You've successfully updated your Foundry instance to the latest version, and you've done so while keeping all of your data intact. And if things didn't go quite to plan, don't worry, that's why we took all those snapshots and backups, so we have options for restoring that. Now, to restore backups and snapshots from Foundry, we're just going to go back to our settings, and if we click on that floppy disk again, where we could have created that snapshot immediately after updating our major version, you can then go through the backups and you can restore them and restore the snapshots. Snapshots are in their own specific section, so that will restore everything, your worlds, your modules, your systems, everything. whereas backups are going to be more granular again. So it's going to be just a specific world or a system or a module that you can bring back. If things were just a little off, like maybe you had to manually reinstall a module that you didn't expect to, and so the migration of data in your world when you fired it up wasn't quite right, then go ahead and restore the backup of that world. If it feels like it's a larger issue, like your modules and your systems are kind of mixed up on what's been properly updated, what hasn't, and you are confident that there are versions of those modules and systems for this major Foundry version, then go ahead and roll back to that snapshot you created after first updating to this version before you actually updated the modules and systems. If you've got really major problems, all of your data is gone or missing or messed up in some way, or you realize that, hey, these modules that were in needs verification are really broken and I just can't do anything in this version of Foundry until they're updated, then we need to completely roll back to the previous version. To do that, we'll go ahead and hop back onto FoundryVTT's website and go back into our purchased licenses. And again, up at the top, we've got our download section, and we're going to click on our version dropdown, and we're just going to select the last stable version that we were on. If you don't remember which version it was specifically, when you look at the snapshots and backups, then the snapshot you took before updating will have the version number for Foundry that it was created on. So select that one, and then you're going to go ahead and download and reinstall Foundry using that. Once you've reinstalled, we'll go back into the backups menu here, go to our snapshots and select the appropriate snapshot and restore it. Once that's restored, we'll be back in business to exactly how we were before we attempted this version update. And then we are free to hang out in the version of Foundry that we started in until the modules and systems that we love to use are ready to go for this next version. So that's how you bring it back from the brink if a update did not go so smoothly. Now let's do a quick recap of everything that we went through today. First, Foundry major versions are things like V11 to V12 rather than build 300 to build 315. And as a result of those major version updates, systems and modules may need some time to go ahead and get caught up with those versions. For that reason, recommend that you wait at least 1 month before you even start looking at updating your Foundry version. When you're ready to start looking into the process, use the compatibility checker to see what modules and systems you have are good to go, which ones are definitely not good to go, and which ones need some verification and might not be working as expected in the next version. When you're ready to take the plunge, make a snapshot on your current version of Foundry before you begin updating. Make sure you've got all of that data backed up. Then, once your snapshot is made, download and install the next version of Foundry. Make another snapshot before you go into updating anything. Then you want to update your systems, then your modules, and then you'll be able to launch and migrate your worlds, again, making a backup beforehand. Once your world has been migrated, you'll need to wait for any additional module or system migrations that have to happen, and then you'll want to verify that everything is working as intended. At that point, if things are looking great, you're good to go, and if they're not, then you'll need to go through the restoration process for the snapshots and backups that you've created. And when it comes to feeling ready for transitioning to the next major version of Foundry, it's also important to check out the communities for the modules and systems that you most heavily interact with. These communities and the developers within them often have a really great idea of the wider ecosystem and how ready it is for the next major version update. For instance, Tim Posney, the module developer of MIDI QOL and similar automation modules for D&D 5e, has a thread in the troubleshooting section of their Discord that discusses a variety of modules, not just those required for MIDI, that have the status of whether they're ready for V12, whether they've been replaced or absorbed into core, etc. So you can go there and know that all of these modules are being looked at by that team to have kind of a community resource rather than having to go through individual pages or just rely on the compatibility checker. Similarly, here at BaileyWiki, we're not quite ready to release our modules for V12, but we are actively talking with all of the module developers behind the modules that we depend upon and leverage for our modules. So when we're ready for V12, that means all of the modules we depend upon are ready, or we have alternatives for them if we need to replace them. So these communities are a great resource for double checking whether things are ready to go or not. Regardless of if you're plugged into a community or this is your very first major Foundry version update, or if it's your 10th major Foundry version update, we hope that this video has been helpful to you and outlined some of the best practices for updating to a major version and making sure that all of your data is good to go. Once again, this has been Zephyr with the BaileyWiki channel. If you liked this video, then subscribe to keep up with all of our latest content and consider becoming a patron. Not only do you support the channel, we also gain access to all the modular systems and scenes that we've made for FoundryVTT, including the gorgeous scenes that you've seen in the background here today. Again, it's been Zephyr. Thank you so much for watching. Happy gaming, and have a good one.